Hi, and welcome back. I'm Sarah Wood-Valley, and we're going to begin our second video, our second class in our Mindfulness Instructor for Children training. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. I used the term point of focus several times in the last video, and I just wanted to make sure that you understand what I mean when I say point of focus. Point of focus is something that we are gazing our attention on during our mindfulness practice. And that's how we practice mindfulness, is we choose something that we're going to focus on so that we can take that step back. It helps us take that step back, like we talked about. And actually, there is a type of mindfulness called open awareness, where we're not necessarily choosing a certain point of focus. But for now, and for anyone who's beginning, especially working with children, it's a really good idea to start out by choosing some type of object that is for your attention, that you're focused on. So that might be looking at a leaf if you're outside, looking at a tree. That might be closing your eyes and listening to the singing bowl if someone's rung the singing bowl. It might be simply the breath. It might be simply closing your eyes and listening to the sound that your breath makes as you breathe in and out, noticing any feelings inside your nostrils as that breath comes in and out. So that might be a different point of focus. Even a pain or ache in your body can serve as something to focus on. Or maybe the temperature on your arm, if there's a cool breeze coming by, something as simple as that could be used as a point of focus. So what happens when we practice mindfulness is we lose our point of focus. Our attention shifts naturally in other directions, and that's okay. That's part of the practice. That's the ebb and flow of our focus. And so what we do as mindfulness practitioners is we non-judgmentally bring our awareness back to whatever that is that we are gazing our attention upon. I'm going to lead you through all of these points of focus that we touched on in the last video. We have physical sensations, sounds, the breath, visual images or objects that we look at, feelings, and thoughts. There's several ways that we can introduce children to feeling their feelings in their body and becoming more aware of that, and aware in a way that they're not used to. They might be used to having a belly ache and noticing when that hurts and telling their parents. They might notice when they're feeling cold, but there's even more that they can notice about their bodies, things that are very subtle. One thing that you can do is you can have them drink a cold glass of water, maybe put ice in the water and have them drink that, ingest that water. And it's such a great practice in feeling how that water, that coldness affects you. They can feel it in their mouth, in their throat, and going down in their body. So the subtleties, how does that temperature of that water affect their whole being? So it's about stopping, being still, and taking notice of something in your body that you wouldn't normally take notice of. And the reason that we want the students, your children, to become aware of these parts of our body and these feelings in our body that they aren't normally aware of is because we want them to get to a place that when they get angry or they get frustrated or they get sad, they can feel it in their body. That is one of the biggest benefits to having a mindfulness practice. So when those really big, heavy, difficult emotions come up, the children can feel it in their body. They can get away from the story of everything that's happening. Oh, their friend Josie said this to their other friend, and so did this, and that made him feel this way, or whatever it is that happened. That story, if we can just step back from that story for a moment and feel our body. What does it feel like in our body when we get our feelings hurt? Do we feel it in our shoulders? Do we feel it in our back? Do we feel it in our belly? Do we feel it in our head? Is our head starting to get tense? So we want the children to be able to take a breath and take an assessment of their body and where is this emotion taking place in their body? How is it affecting the different parts of their body? And to do that, they need to practice beforehand, before they're upset, before they get frustrated, before they get sad. They need to practice this awareness of all the muscles in their body and all the feelings in their body and their breath and their heartbeat and any subtleties that they can. So when they are feeling that deep emotion, they can really sense it in their body, and it's different for everyone. So we can't tell them how they're going to feel this emotion. It might feel a certain way for you, but for the child it could feel completely different. So we need to support them to discover that on their own. And what we're ultimately teaching the child is to notice instead of interact. So when that emotion comes up, you're taking a step back, they're noticing what's happening right now in the present moment in their world, in their own world. I'm going to lead you through this mindfulness exercise. It has to do with socks. So if you're wearing some socks, that's great. If you don't, maybe you can slip a pair on. So here you go. Go ahead and find a comfortable place, whether you're lying down or sitting comfortably in a cushion or chair. Take in a deep breath, close your eyes, and as you exhale, feel your shoulders relaxing. Another deep breath in. As you exhale, feel your chest relax. One more deep breath in. And feel the rest of your body melting into the cushion or other furniture. How do your feet feel in your socks? Are they tight or loose? How do your feet feel in your shoes? Notice where your pants make contact with your skin. What texture do you feel? Do your clothes feel heavy or warm or cool? Can you feel your belly against the shirt that you're wearing when you take in a breath? Does your shirt feel rough or smooth? How does the furniture feel against your body? Does it feel hard or soft? Can you feel air on your face? Can you feel the air touch the skin of your face? What does that feel like? Feel where your lips touch. Feel where your eyelids meet. Feel where your nose touches the air. Does it feel like a certain temperature, either warm or cool? Take in a breath and exhale, noticing this air moving through your body. When you take in another breath in, notice the temperature of the air going through your nostrils. And then as you breathe back out, notice the temperature of that air going back out of your nostrils. Do you sense a difference? All right, that concludes our mindfulness exercise. You can go ahead and open your eyes. If you're lying down, you can go ahead and sit up. Sounds are another great example for our point of focus during mindfulness. In fact, physical sensations and sounds is a good place to start. Those are the 2 points of focus that I recommend using in the beginning. to really help the students get a sense of what this mindfulness practice is about tuning into these subtleties and feeling the benefits, feeling that relaxing and more aware and awake feeling that we get when we practice, really taking notice to the feelings in our body and to sounds. So sounds could be anything from a child closing their eyes and listening to the birds chirp outside, or if they are outside, there's so many neat sounds if they close their eyes that they can tune into. Indoors, it might be as simple as listening to a fan, if that's something that's already going on in the room where you are, or clock ticking. You'd be surprised how many subtle sounds go on in our inside world that we're not normally aware of until we take that time to just really sit and be still. Another typical sound to focus on is the breath, the sound that your breath makes going inside your body and then coming back out. If you're in a classroom with children, the sounds going on in the room, any little creaks and movement and sounds outside the doorway, on the street, are all examples of sounds that the students can tune into. And it's really fun to talk about it afterwards and have the students report back to, what were all the different kind of sounds that you heard, or almost have a little bit of a contest to see who can tune into the most sounds. And of course, when we're practicing mindfulness, it's not a contest, but in that time when we're really teaching those skills and getting the students excited about it, sometimes some of those tasks can help generate motivation, excitement, and things like that. Meditation teachers love to use the breath as a point of focus. One of the reasons is it's always there, right? We always have access to our breath. We are always breathing. I've already talked about the subtleties of the breath, but just as a recap, the temperature of the air coming in versus the temperature coming out is a nice subtlety of the breath. The way our body moves while we breathe, you're feeling the chest expand and move back down and opening up and closing back up a little bit. That's something that the students can become mindful of. The students can follow the breath going in. It's just something that they're focused on. They're focused on, where is that breath? Where is it at? Where is it located? Is it coming into the mouth, or is it coming into the nose? It's coming through the throat and down, and then following it back out. Something else you can do while the children are following their breath is make a little bit of a noise, some kind of distraction, and challenge them to stay focused on their breath despite the distracting sound that you might make. Visual objects, visual images are a great choice for your point of focus. They work really well for me. I think this is because I'm very visual, and so I am already tuning into what's visually happening around me. I like to meditate with my eyes open, looking at stacked stones, and this helps combat all of these visual images that are coming up in my imagination. If I were to just close my eyes and meditate and focus on my breath, I do have a lot of these visual images that come into my consciousness, which if you're practicing mindfulness is okay. Just notice them, let them come and go, but it's a little bit of a shortcut. I like to meditate with my eyes open and look at something, and that doesn't seem to happen as much. When you're teaching mindfulness, it's really great to get to know your students and know how their minds work, how they process information, and this will help you and help them. They can figure this stuff out about themselves as well, to know which kind of point of focus really works best for them. But in the beginning, it's good to just learn a lot of different types over time, not all at once. You might get a little overwhelmed, but to know, to be able to pick and choose what you'd like to use. So for physical objects to focus on, I talked about a plant. Anything from nature offers a really great surface, nice textures, nice colors that are natural. I have a hard time focusing on an object that is man-made. For some reason, in my meditation, I feel like I start connecting to the thoughts that were used to create it, and it distracts me. But if it's something from nature, it's quiet. It's a quiet item, something to look at. I really like my stack stones. So plants, your hands. Children can meditate just looking at their hands. Their hands are on their lap. That's perfectly acceptable. Some people like to look at a detailed painting, and we're actually going to do that in a moment. And just almost as not necessarily meditation, but as an exercise, an exercise in mindfulness, and it can be a little bit fun too when you're working with the kids. I'd invite you to look at this photo for 15 seconds and notice all the details that you can, no matter how small and seemingly insignificant. And then we'll go ahead and talk about it afterwards. So like I said, this is a great activity to do with children. Put up some kind of crazy picture like this with just a lot going on and see how much they can remember of it afterwards. And now that the photo is no longer there, what can you remember? Can you list 5 things from that photo? Did you notice the color of the umbrellas? Did you notice the street sign? I'm looking at it right here. I'm cheating a little bit. Did you notice some of the signs? Maybe some of the colors of the different hats. So there's a lot going on there and a lot of subtleties that we can remember. Feelings are something else we can use for our point of focus, something that's a little difficult even for adults. It is more advanced, so I would be careful not to introduce this to children who are just beginning to learn mindfulness. You want to start with the physical sensations, the sounds, things like that. But once you get into more advanced levels, this is something that can be very beneficial. Simply closing your eyes and noticing what emotions might be coming up. And typical practice is labeling those feelings. Fear, labeling it as fear. Labeling emotion as excitement, and so forth. Or like George, he played a song and asked the children to become aware of the feelings that the song brings up for them. Or a story. If you're reading a children's book to one of your children, just as a practice in mindfulness in everyday life, asking them, notice what feelings are coming up as I'm reading this story to you. All right. And thoughts. Thoughts are the top of the top as far as what we can become mindful of and our skill level. So simply, what thoughts are coming up that may be distracting you from your point of focus? That's one way we can become mindful of thoughts. So if we are paying attention to our breath, what are those thoughts that are coming into our consciousness while we're focusing on breath? It's totally fine. We just notice the thought and then we bring our consciousness, our attention back to our breath. Well, what are those thoughts? Is it something that you need to go buy at the store? Is it something that came up in a phone conversation that you had earlier? What are those thoughts? And not getting engaged in it, but just noticing what that is and then letting it go. And the children, maybe children who are 12, 13 years old, maybe up there, this is something for them to start embarking on and paying attention to what those thoughts are and letting them go. Noticing, then letting it go. Thoughts might come up when they're reading a story also, just having that conversation with them. While you're reading at that age, you might not necessarily be reading to them, but encouraging them. When you're reading a book, what kind of thoughts are coming up while you're reading the thought? Another example of becoming mindfulness of our thoughts, not necessarily during meditation, but just in life. And to begin this process with children, you might want to start by having them write out a list. What are some of the thoughts that you think about, and writing them down and talking about them, so when they get into the meditation, it's a little bit easier for them to notice what those thoughts are, while at the same time encouraging them not to have those thoughts affect them, right? It's just taking the step back. It's almost like you're saying to yourself, I'm noticing I'm thinking about my friend John right now. Just noticing that. And that'll pass. I'm going to show you another video. It's one of Alexa's class. She was in the video in last class. In this video, she introduces her students to a meditation jar. You can take any kind of mason jar, add water to it, mix in some sand. Some people have used glitter, even dirt, baking soda. I think baking soda is what Alexa uses. Flour, whole wheat flour, something that can mix in with the water and then separate. People have also used Caro syrup or glycerin. Caro syrup is a kind of a cheaper version, so you don't have to buy a bunch of glycerin, but mixing the Caro syrup and the water together, which makes the substance, whatever's in there, glitter, whatever it is, to suspend in the water for a little bit longer. And so what you do with the jar is you shake it up, and that represents our thoughts, our minds, everything in there moving around and blinking everywhere. And then you set the jar down, and over time, all of that sediment settles. And that is a great way to show the children how those thoughts in our mind can settle and become still as well. And I love to have the kids shake the jar up before we meditate, and then we go into our own meditation, and then we check out the jar after our own meditation to see how it's doing and compare, did the same thing happen to us in our mind, and did our thoughts settle to some degree. So enjoy the video.
And we're going to do a little experiment now too, to talk a little bit more about meditation. I'm going to have you each take the jar of water here and hold it. And what do you notice as you're looking through that jar?
Well, it's full and it has like nothing in it, so it's all really clean.
Faster. I'm going to shake it up.
Now it's dirtier with like stuff in it, and it's not that clear anymore.
Yeah, and I noticed that I can't see through it. It's just like blocked. But if we wait just a minute.
Now it's getting a little clearer up there.
It's starting to clear.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what happens when you meditate, when you're aware of your breathing, and when you meditate. All those thoughts and concerns we talked about at the beginning, and those, those feelings that are hard feelings and sometimes not happy feelings, when you start to meditate, they just settle and you feel clear.
Clear. With all the
See?
powder down there.
And that's like meditation.
So like in this experiment is like the powder, the thoughts that are like just clearing down.
Absolutely, yes. That the jar has been meditating, and as it does, all those thoughts and worries and maybe anger at one of your siblings, just all settles, all those kinds of things.
Here is a review of the developmental levels and what point of focus you probably want to use. So like I said, at any age, using physical sensations, sounds, and the mindfulness bell. At any age, focusing on something more visual. And then getting a little bit older, breath and feelings would be a step up, and then finally thoughts, because this requires them to be in the beta state. I'm going to share with you another study. It was published in the Journal of School of Psychology. The subjects were 101 sixth graders. 50 of those students were in a control group and 50 were in the experimental group. They practiced mindfulness at the beginning of social studies class, beginning of history class, every day. That was the experimental group. Control group did a different little activity at the beginning of every social studies class. They began with 3 minutes of meditation and worked up to 12 minutes per day. The first week they focused on their breath, as well as the second week. The third week they focused on body sensations. The fourth week they focused on thoughts and emotions. And the fifth and sixth weeks the students got to choose what they wanted to focus on. When they practiced the breath awareness, this is what they were guided to do. The teacher would say, practice paying attention to the tips of your nose and abdomen. If your attention wanders, gently bring it back to either the top of your nose or your abdomen. Feel the breath pass through your nose or feel the breath settle in your abdomen. Count your breaths in sets of 5. If you lose count, start again at 1. So those were the directions for the breath awareness, or at least part of the directions in excerpt. For awareness of thoughts and feelings, they were asked to label their thoughts, label their feelings, and any sensations. For example, the way I understand it is if a thought came into their mind, they wouldn't necessarily say, like I had said before, I'm noticing that I'm thinking about my friend John right now. Instead, they noticed that thought about their friend John, and then they just labeled it thought. Thought, that's a thought, that's a thought. If a feeling came up, if they were feeling restless, they'd say feeling, it's a feeling. If they felt a physical sensation, they would label that. If it was itch, they'd say that's itch, that's an itch. If it was something that was uncomfortable, a pain, they'd say that's a pain, and so forth. They also did body sweeps or body scans. They were directed to practice paying attention to different parts of your body by sweeping your attention through your body. Begin with your feet. What body sensations do you feel here? And then they would go on to the legs, the abdomen, the chest, the arms, and the head. So the results of this study are pretty interesting. The experimental group decreased their anxiety by 22%. Internalizing problems decreased by 18%. Externalizing problems decreased by 19%. Attention issues decreased by 19%. It's also interesting that the control group had a 10% more thoughts about self-harm or suicide. So the way that they gathered the data in this study was self-monitoring. They had surveys that they filled out on themselves. What they ended up doing in this trial was at the end, by the 5th and 6th week, the students were choosing what they wanted to use for their point of focus, which is the great place to end up. There's different ways that you can get there. If you're working with a class, you might first begin, the whole class is learning about focusing on sounds. The whole class is learning about focusing on body sensations and so forth. And then after maybe a couple months, then the class will decide together, today or this week, we're going to focus on body sensation. And then maybe another day, this whole class, we'll decide together, we're going to focus on this. And then after a couple months of that, then you work up to each child in the class choosing their own. So getting to that point where they're all using different points of focus for their mindfulness meditation. So they're really owning it. In our last video, I talked about content versus form. This is a key concept in mindfulness. And it's not necessarily a concept that you need to teach the children right away. In fact, it might be something that you wouldn't talk to them about until they're maybe a teenager. But it's good for you to have this background so you can guide them and prepare them to really understand this concept when it's time. So just as a review, the content is the story, right? If we are sitting in meditation and we are thinking about a conversation that we had with someone a few hours before, and we're thinking about what happened and how we feel about what happened, what we think about what happened, that's the story, that's the content. And with our mindfulness practice, we are taking a step back from that content and we're noticing the form. The form is abstract. And when we are in our meditation and we're being mindful of these thoughts that are coming into our consciousness, and we want to notice what the form of those thoughts are, we can imagine the thoughts as something visual. I know this sounds kind of strange, but it really does help. And a lot of meditators who've been practicing mindfulness for a long time, they do this and it happens relatively naturally. They might not necessarily on purpose decide, this thought is going to have this kind of visual form for me. I often will hear people who've been practicing mindfulness for 20, 30 years say that it kind of looks like a wave to them. Their thoughts, when we take that step back and notice thoughts in their form, not their content, they look like waves. For me, it looks kind of like static. I'll notice having a lot of thoughts, and I'll take that step back and look at the form that those thoughts are taking, and it's just kind of like a ball with some static coming out of it. So it could be anything. It could be completely different for you. But I just want you to get an idea of what I mean by this content is turning into something that's abstract in a form. And that's like a really kind of deep, big idea that the kids don't necessarily need to be doing, but that's what underlies what's underlying all of this that we're learning about mindfulness. So I want to make sure that makes sense. So we're going to get into some kind of deep neurology here, so bear with me. But I think it helps us put together that big picture of what we're teaching the children, where we're guiding them in a direction. We're guiding them it's almost like a lifestyle. So it's really great for us to understand the whole big picture of what's happening. So I went back to school just a few years ago to get my certification to be a math teacher. And it was really interesting to learn about some of this psychology and how it fits in with the mindfulness and all the meditation that I'd been teaching for 20 years. So the information processing model is a great way to simplify this process of what happens in the brain. The sensory memory, this is where the stimuli is coming into our consciousness. All right, all the sounds that we're hearing, the things that people are saying, the things that we're watching on YouTube, all of that is coming into our sensory memory, and it's there. And then we begin to work with that stimuli. We begin to make connections. We begin to compare and contrast. And the reason that we were learning this information model in teaching school is because we, as teachers, need to support students in this phase, in this short-term memory, right? So it first comes into the sensory memory and then moves into the short-term memory. And that's where us as teachers, where we want to help them make those connections and compare and contrast and form opinions and all of that. And then it moves into the long-term memory, which is ultimately, as teachers, where we want the information to get stored, right? We want it to be there in a long term that they can access throughout their lives. And this, when it makes it to long-term memory, this is where we really start to form perceptions. It helps us form a perception of everything that's going around us. That's great. That's how we learn. But that's not how we practice mindfulness. It's like completely opposite. So let me back up and look at it from a different lens. So with mindfulness, we're having all the stimuli come in, right? It's coming into that sensory memory. We're hearing the birds chirp. We're hearing someone say something next to us. we're listening to our breath. All of those things are coming into our sensory memory. But for practicing mindfulness, that's pretty much where we want it to stay. We don't want it to move into that short-term memory. We don't want to analyze it. We don't want to make connections. We don't want to think about it. So when we're practicing mindfulness, we're letting that stimuli come in. We're not trying to control that stimuli. We're letting it come in. We're just not encouraging it to move into the place of short-term memory. We're not going to form thoughts and feelings and emotions about this stimuli. We're just going to experience it as it is, and we're going to let it come in, and then we're going to let it pass us by. And this is how we take a step back. This is exactly what I've been talking about. Taking a step back and noticing things just as they are in their abstract form and leaving it at that and enjoying all of the benefits that come from that type of practice. A lot of benefits come from the practice of being analytical too. So this isn't to necessarily take over that analytical brain and that analytical process, because that's important. We need that. We need that in our work. We need that in our schooling. We need that to make decisions. But especially in today's world with all the information that we're all exposed to, it's important to have that tool to bring the balance between that thinking mind and then a more mindful mind. There's a great book called Buddha's Brain by Dr. Rick Hanson. He brings up some really important points in that book that really help me get and understand why it's so hard for us to do this, especially when we're in adulthood, to really just sit down and quiet our minds and just listen for the sake of listening. And what he describes in that book is that we were not evolved as a species to do this. We evolved to do quite the opposite. When you go back to the story of the man in the woods running from the tiger, okay, it was the story, it was the content that made survival possible. It was that content, it was that story that, you know what, tigers eat people, so I need to run. And what we're asking ourselves to do here is to let go of the story and just let it be and just notice the tiger. And that's scary, and that is not what we were built to do. So we're doing a practice, and we're asking children to do a practice that we were not built to do, in that sense, in that biological evolution of humanity. It's not what we were built to do. So the reason that it's important to know that this is what's happening, and this is the dilemma that we're all faced when we sit down to learn mindfulness, is if we can become sensitive to this, that we can become sensitive to the fact that it is scary, it does bring stuff up, and it might bring stuff up and you don't even know why it's bringing stuff up, because I believe it's built in our DNA to maybe not really just let go of the story, to not step back and look at that form. And so when we become sensitive to the fact that that is kind of scary, then us as teachers, as we're guiding students through this process, then we can be sensitive to that, and we can acknowledge that in them. Like, yeah, I know this can be scary, especially if you're working with groups of children that have been through trauma, that are living lives that every day they need to watch their back. When you're working with that group of children that are going through those hard times, asking them to close their eyes and not think and just notice the sounds around them, they're like, no, this is not good. Something's going to happen to me. Like, I can't do this. And if that's not what they're thinking about consciously, they're feeling it. They're feeling it subconsciously. So when we're leading these students through this type of experience, it's important that we are reassuring, that we reassure them that they're going to be completely safe, that you're going to watch out for them, that if they close their eyes, you are going to watch around them. You're going to make sure that nobody invades their space, that they're safe. And not in giving them time to get to a place where they feel comfortable enough to close their eyes. I still have students in my class that, they don't close their eyes when we practice the mindfulness, even if it's just for a couple minutes at the beginning of class. And I don't want to push that. They need to get to that place where they do feel comfortable and they do know that they're going to be in a safe place. So you can address it directly and tell them. In my own practice, I have felt sensations of nausea from getting to this place of no thought. It can take 40 minutes of sitting into my meditation before I get to it. It doesn't always happen, but whenever I'm on that real cusp of just completely letting go and that analytical mind really just ceases to exist, that point right before that, I do feel a sense of nausea and almost like this feeling of falling off a cliff. And so I think that roots back into that fear of getting to this place where we're letting go of the story. And also wanted to mention about how we want to make sure that the meditation time, the mindfulness time, doesn't feel like a consequence of punishment, that they feel like this is part of who they are and how much it's going to help them. Because going and sitting and being quiet is something that a lot of children have experienced as punishment. You need to go sit down, you need to be quiet, you're in a timeout, so you need to be sensitive about that. So I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. I'm sure that you're very good at that. We probably aren't going to use the terms form and content when we're teaching mindfulness to children, but some terms that we can use that work really well are the alert mind and the thinking mind. And the alert mind, to teach that concept, it's really nice to think about animals, like a wolf in the woods. A wolf in the woods that's 100% in tune, aware of its surroundings. And we could show the students a picture of a wolf and ask them, what is this wolf doing? Is this wolf thinking about what he just ate for dinner, or is he really focused on listening to any sounds that he hears in that in the forest? So the alert mind and the thinking mind both have their benefits and both have their non-benefits. And when working with children that are a little bit older, maybe 4th, 5th, 6th grade and up, we can talk about the pros and cons of the alert mind and the pros and cons of the thinking mind. So the alert mind is great in sports. When playing sports, you can be completely in tune with everything that's going on around you. You can better absorb what you're learning in school when your attention is fully there. You can be a better friend because you can be present in the moment when you're listening to your friend speak. So those are some examples of some benefits of the alert mind. And that alert mind, when I keep saying that, I mean the mindful mind, the mind that's not thinking and analyzing, but really in tune with the stimuli that's happening in the moment. But some disadvantages of the alert mind is it can be tiring. I mean, if you're in that zone for an extended period of time, it can be tiring. And it also can be difficult to process something intellectually, to solve a math problem, for example, if you're in that real, true alert mind. So that's why the thinking mind helps us, right? We have both. The thinking mind is really great for making decisions when we're analyzing, when we're working on our homework. But the non-benefit, kind of an issue with the thinking mind, is over time it can stress us out. We're analyzing so much and we're really getting caught up in all of the details of events in our lives, and that causes stress over time. So that's why it's nice to have that balance between the alert mind and the thinking mind. And this alert mind is a good way to talk about mindful posture as well. That when we're alert, we're sitting up and we're straight, and just like the animals are. In pop culture, you can talk about with the children some characters that have that really good with their alert mind. Maybe ninjas, right? Ninjas need to be really quiet and still to hear what's going on. samurais, athletes, Star Wars characters in Star Wars really in tune using the Force. So things like that can really help the children understand, wrap their brain around what you're talking about. This video that you're about to watch shows a school in California that taught essentially mindfulness. They call it quiet time to all of their students in the middle school. It was a mindful school. And they reaped some great benefits from that practice. It's an awesome story. Enjoy.
I became principal of Visitation Valley Middle School in the fall of 1999. My first day here, I heard noise outside. I looked out my window and there were two students tearing the gate off the hinges to get into the yard to play basketball. When I got out to the yard, I noticed there were some young students playing cops and robbers. I walked up to the young man and I said, "Hey, can I look at that for a minute?" And he said, "Sure." And he handed me his father's .45. In the 2002-2003 school year, we had 41 murders occur in this neighborhood. And the students at this school either were related to the persons who did the shooting, who were shot, or were present when the shooting took place. So there was a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety and fear for the students.
The stress levels were so high that everyone was really functioning at a disadvantage as a result of the environment, and it was impacting their psychological well-being. And many of the students actually have not only ADHD but PTSD.
Go take a ride down any barrio or ghetto in America and you hear the boom boxes, you hear the shouting, and unfortunately too many of our kids even hear gunfire.
I think that many urban schools today are run like jails because the kids are out of control, and that's because of the environment they live in. We're not running a jail here, we're running a school.
The research is showing that stress is a major problem in our educational system. We can't have an effective educational system if we don't address the problem of stress. This impacts our neurophysiological functioning.
In order for kids to learn and be creative, they have to feel happy and safe. So I needed to start working on the social emotional end of things. And I heard about quiet time. And we took a brave step forward into a new world of teaching our students how to meditate.
Head up, eyes closed, quiet time starts now.
Quiet time is the first activity of the day when the students arrive, and it's also the last activity of the day before they're dismissed. The teacher rings a bell, and that starts the quiet time session. There's a 12-minute time period from when the teacher rings the first bell until the teacher rings the second bell. It's really completely silent in the room. Students are meditating.
How many people here meditated? Raise your hand.
I'm Jocelyn. I am an 8th grader at Visitation Valley Middle School. I live on Sunnydale. There was a day where there were people walking and then my dad he heard gunshots. Like I felt like I couldn't move. The meditation helped me. It was like a force that blocked what I just experienced.
You're giving the kids a coping mechanism. The problems that you have keep coming, except your ability to deal with them changes. Behaviorally, you see a difference, especially I definitely saw a correlation between their behavior and being more manageable in class after they started meditating.
If we continue to do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. Is that good enough? I don't think it's good enough for the 21st century. We need to be the outliers to try things that have never been tried and see if they work. In education, our job is to touch the future.
I don't know about you, but that video makes me cry every time. It's just so heartwarming. Mindful Schools has a great poll. These numbers are from middle school students. 80% of middle school students that they polled said mindfulness helped them calm down more easily when they got upset. 58% said mindfulness helped them focus better in class. 40% said they used mindfulness to avoid arguments and fights. 34% said mindfulness raised their grades. And 86% said more kids should learn mindfulness. These reflect what I've come to understand and what I've read is that mindfulness helps social behaviors the best. That's where the benefits shine most brightly. And academically, they help as well, but not as much as those social benefits. You know, all of that we've been talking about, taking that step back and taking pause before going into action to really help them with their interactions with other children and adults. As I mentioned before, I am a school teacher, and I'd like to share with you some of my experience teaching mindfulness in a classroom setting. The biggest thing that I've learned and found to be the core of what's important when teaching mindfulness in the classroom is finding that sweet spot between routine and choice and freedom, which I guess for teaching it's a sweet spot for just about anything, but it really is true with the mindfulness practice. So I found that what's important to keep routine is time. It's nice to practice at the same time in a consistent basis. So that might be at the beginning of every class. You might practice mindfulness for a couple minutes at the start of every class so that they're expected. That's what they are ready for. They know it's coming. But we need to be careful about doing the same thing over and over because we lose their interest. So that's why the choice aspect can help the students stay interested, and not only choice but variety. So how can we share variety in the classroom when it comes to teaching mindfulness? That has a lot to do with the points of focus. Not sticking to the same point of focus for an entire month, maybe switching it up every week. And then at some point, like I mentioned before, supporting the children to choose their own point of focus, so they feel like they're invested. They have some say in their own practice. And participation, having students take turns coming up and ringing the singing bowl. That's very simple but very big. My students get excited when it's their turn to come up and ring the singing bowl, especially great for those students that aren't into it. It's like, you notice a kid that day, it's just, this mindfulness is just not for them. Say, hey, Tom, do you want to come up and be the one that rings the singing bowl today? So that can sometimes completely switch their attitude about the practice. I love doing the activity of asking the students to listen to the singing bowl and raise their hand when the sound of that singing bowl stops for them. It's always so curious because that sound stops at different times for different people, depending on how our hearing is wired. That one never gets old. I really like doing that. Sharing, if you have time, I know that's the big thing with being a teacher and teaching mindfulness, is how much time can you give up on the content that you're teaching versus doing some mindfulness. But if you have time, having the students share about their practice, share about their challenges, what are they having a hard time with, and that is so valuable because then other students can hear that and they are probably having some of the same challenges. They don't feel alone, and we can learn from each other's challenges. And also sharing their successes, as a classroom, to the classroom. What are you experiencing this week that you attribute to your mindfulness practice? How are you feeling better? In those success stories, making that space for that. Another great thing to do is to do self-reporting with the students. Have them take a survey before you begin teaching them mindfulness and then after. And some of the survey questions might be, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 how you handled your anger this week. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 how focused you felt in class. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 how well you interacted with other students when hard stuff came up. Okay, so that might be some of the questions that you would ask them and give them a rating. And then a couple months later, give them that same survey and have them answer those same questions and show them, look at this. You rated yourself, 3 points higher on your ability to really handle your anger after you learned your mindfulness practice. So when we do that, the students can really see, yeah, this is working, and that is what we want. We ultimately want the students to see for themselves, yeah, this is working. And what's also really helpful to have successful mindfulness in your classroom is making it part of the culture. And so what I mean by that is you can have the teacher stand up there and teach the mindfulness and tell the students what mindfulness is and all the benefits. But then the other scenario is having it be the class culture and having the students actually be taking ownership of that and taking leadership on what mindfulness is and mindfulness speak within the classroom. Students pointing things out that other students that are doing that are really mindful. That's a sign of a culture, that mindfulness has become part of the culture. When it's not the teacher necessarily always the one talking about, when the students are talking about and pointing it out and recognizing it, or recognizing when it's not happening, and recognizing that, we need a mindful moment right now because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's going on that's we're really off task, we're really unfocused. Can we have a mindful moment right now? So it becomes part of the culture of the classroom. Mindfulness at home. Practicing as a family is very valuable. When the children see that you as parents are practicing, you're modeling that to them. And it's not just sitting there practicing in meditation together every Sunday night or whenever you decide to do it, but it's also that mindful living. When you find yourself as a parent getting frustrated about something, if you can get to that point, model your mindfulness practice to your children in the moment. Like, I'm feeling really frustrated right now, and I'm feeling it right here in my shoulders. I can feel like a tightening in my shoulders, and I'm just going to kind of let go of what is happening right now, the story of what got me frustrated. I'm just going to focus on that tense feeling in my shoulders, and just breathe and breathe and notice, and eventually what happens is that tightness in your shoulders will loosen up because you've taken a step back from that story. And I know that's really hard to do, and sometimes when you get frustrated, it's like not possible. But if there are some like little frustrations that you can take to model that to your children and to walk them through it, just verbally out loud, talk them through what you're feeling and what you're noticing. It's just so helpful. The kids will just really get it when they see you do it, and when they see it works, when they see, yeah, you were like really mad, and then you do this mindfulness thing, and all of a sudden you're just like, okay, everything's okay. Like, I'm really still having the same opinions about what happened, but I'm calmer, and we can talk about it, and we can find a resolution. It's gold. It's money. Taking nature walks as a family and talking about mindfulness on the nature walk. What are we hearing? What kinds of birds and animals are we hearing on our nature walk? What kind of colors are we seeing? What about the textures of these trees that are around us? That's mindfulness. That's mindfulness in everyday life. And the kids will really pick up on it. And again, making mindfulness part of the culture of the family. So that means it's not always the parents saying, okay, we need to be mindful right now. It's the kids also bringing it up and pointing things out and saying, I was really mindful in this moment. This is how I handled it. This is what I noticed. And then that also means maybe pointing out that someone wasn't so mindful. It could be your own child pointing out to you, Mom, you aren't really being very mindful right now. You seem like you're kind of losing it. So you have to be open up to that. But when that's happening, when the kids are talking about it and recognizing it, that's becoming part of the culture of the family. I have a lot of counselors who take this class, so I want to address some of the ways that mindfulness can be used in the counseling office with children dealing with stress. Mindfulness is a wonderful, wonderful way to reduce stress. And so a lot of those students that you're working with in the counseling office are probably dealing with stress. They're probably having anxiety, and they really need those tools to calm themselves and to function and to be able to sit through a class and when they're having a panic attack, how to handle that. So there's lots of reasons why mindfulness helps with stress. One of the reasons is something called the basal ganglia, which is a cluster of nerves in the brain. And that part of the brain particularly gets triggered when in stressful situations. And research shows that mindfulness helps calm that part of the brain, the basal ganglia, that cluster of nerves. And for chronic stress, the basal ganglia is triggered indefinitely. And so it takes a mindfulness practice day by day to calm and soothe that part of our brain to bring us into a state that's not so anxious. And healing trauma, mindfulness is like a reset. The mindfulness practice can act as a balancer to bring harmony to trauma that has happened in their lives. Mindfulness practice can bring empowerment to a child, can make them feel more confident. And an example of that would be a child who uses mindfulness to control their emotions. When they learn how to notice these emotions in their bodies, when they're getting angry and they're able to, for themselves, calm themselves down and pause and act rationally and make good choices, they feel better. They feel more confident. So that's a great example of how mindfulness can be used in the counseling session. Loving kindness is a wonderful way for students who are dealing with trauma and stress to find peace, to find forgiveness. The loving kindness meditation is about wishing for yourself that you are secure, that you are happy, that you are at peace. And the next piece to that is extending that to somebody else. So in your loving kindness meditation, then you wish someone else to have peace, someone else to feel secure and feel safe. And then the third part of the loving kindness meditation is to extend that to everyone, all the beings in the world. And this is very Buddhist, very efficient, very effective way to bring harmony and peace to a child who's experienced a lot of trauma or dealing with a lot of anxiety. And I'm going to go ahead and lead you through a loving kindness meditation right now. Go ahead and find a comfortable place to sit or even lie down if that's more comfortable for you. And before we officially go into the experience, I'd like you to think of somebody in your life that you might feel a close connection to, or you might feel neutral about. That's up to you. Whether you're lying down or sitting, taking a few deep, relaxing breaths. As you exhale, feel your body slowing down, relaxing. Another deep breath in. And as you breathe back out, feeling your thoughts just become more still. I wish for myself to be happy. I wish for myself to be healthy. I wish for myself to be safe and secure. I wish for this person in my life to be happy. I wish for this person in my life to be healthy. I wish for this person in my life to be safe and secure. May all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings everywhere be healthy. May all beings everywhere be safe and secure. Research shows that loving kindness practice reduces stress for subjects who practice for 8 weeks, not necessarily every day. Other research shows that subjects who practice on a daily basis enjoy even more benefits, specifically physiological benefits such as decrease in inflammation. When I went over some techniques for teaching mindfulness in the classroom, I mentioned surveys as a way to show students how much the mindfulness practice is affecting their lives in a positive way. So I thought we could write up some surveys and some goals of your program, whether you're working in a classroom or you're at home or you're working in a therapist's office or you're a yoga teacher. I think this will be helpful. So the first thing that we need to do is come up with the goals for your program. What is it that you want the students to get out of their mindfulness practice? And I'll list some here, and they may be completely different from your own goals and what you want out of your program, but at least you can see the format. You can see how I go about doing this. Mine are a little bit more teacher focused since I am a teacher. So maybe a goal is enhanced focus. And some ways that we can describe that goal are the students have a longer duration on tasks, meaning they focus longer on the tasks. They look up from their work less often to survey the surroundings around them. Another way we could break down the enhanced focus, break down that particular goal, is they're physically more still. They're not tapping their pencil as much. They're not kicking their chair as much. And then one last way is they are sharing more thoughtful responses when they are in discussion. Because of their mindfulness practice, they are able to make more connections and think more deeply and offer those more thoughtful responses. Another goal you might have is increased academic progress. So let's break down that goal. What does that look like? That might be a more, if you're a parent, from the parent's perspective, maybe you're getting more positive reports from teachers. Maybe the students' grades are higher. Maybe their overall attitude about their schoolwork is better. They're feeling more inclined to do their work. They're not feeling as negatively toward completing it. And then how about just increased fulfillment from the work that they do? After they complete their work, they feel really good and they feel like they've accomplished something special, something important. So here's a goal that isn't necessarily about academics. How about healthier relationships? And let's break that goal down. What does that look like? Maybe the child is speaking more positively about other children, other people in their lives. Maybe they are offering compliments and noticing some positive attributes in other people. Maybe they're less impulsive with their actions. So if they're interacting with a fellow student or even a parent or teacher, maybe they are taking a pause before they speak and being more mindful about their actions. Maybe in social situations, they're feeling more included and they're going out of their way to include others. So this awareness of other people and their feelings and becoming more of a group, creating a community with others. Maybe we can tell they're having healthier relationships because their own buttons are getting pushed less often by other kids and other people. Or a goal might be higher executive functioning. So what does that look like? How do we know that the students that you're working with are having higher executive functioning? Maybe they're more prepared when they go to school or they go to their activities. They're bringing everything that they need to bring. They're less forgetful. They are remembering things that need to be done, things they need to tell people, things they need to complete. Maybe they're more interested in planning for their future. A mindfulness practice can certainly help us just take a pause and be able to reflect more, which also leads to thinking about our future more and what can we do now in this moment to create a better tomorrow for ourselves. Maybe they're becoming more organized all around. Their bedroom is being kept more neat. their book bag is cleaned out more often, as well as their locker at school. These are all some ways that we can tell that the mindfulness is working if these are your goals. Now that we've come up with a few goals and we've broken each goal down, listing some descriptors, some things that we can notice that tell us that yes, this goal is being met, let's now create some survey questions that students can answer about themselves, about whether these items are happening, that these things are being met. So these survey questions that I'm going to go ahead and write based on some of these goals would be shown to the students before they start learning mindfulness from you, and they would answer these questions before they start learning. And then they would answer these same questions after they've gone through your mindfulness training, whatever it is that you have prepared for them. In addition, you might want to have them also answer these same questions in the middle of the training, depending on how long the training is. And you want to ask the same questions each time, because what it is it's a comparison. How did they answer this question in September when you began? How did they answer this question in November when you were in the middle of teaching them all of the mindfulness techniques? And then perhaps you end in December, and then you ask them again at the end of December these same questions, and then you're comparing, and how do they answer them now after they've been practicing for a few months. One survey question might be, I can focus on my schoolwork for longer periods of time. Now that's more of a statement, so they're really rating themselves on how much they agree. Maybe you've taken those surveys before. I completely agree, I somewhat agree, I somewhat disagree, I definitely disagree. So that's how they would be answering these questions. And you might want to reword that for the first survey. You might want to say instead, I can focus on my schoolwork, period. I look up from my work and look at my surroundings less often. Or simply, I look up from my work and look at my surroundings. Or I am happier when I work hard on an assignment. Or simply, I'm happy when I work hard on an assignment. Now, considering that goal about healthier relationships, a survey question might be, I feel like my friends are including me more often. Or simply, I feel like my friends are including me. I agree strongly. I somewhat agree. I disagree somewhat. I disagree strongly. I am better at taking a pause before I speak to my friends. That would be addressing that impulsivity. My buttons are getting pushed less often by others. And then remember that goal that I made about executive functioning. So this might be a survey question. I can remember all the things I need to take to my classes. At night, I spend more time getting organized for the next day. And then a survey question that would have to do with them being more organized with their locker or their book bag could be, I take more time to clean out my locker and book bag. All right, so those questions lend well to the I agree completely, I somewhat agree, and so forth. This question I'm going to write a little bit differently. This would be a rating. I scale myself from 1 to 5, for example. And if you're going to do ratings, to keep data consistent between different children and different periods of time, it's nice to break down the scale. What does a 1 mean? What does a 2 mean? 3 mean? And so on. You might write something like, on a scale from 1 to 5, how well have you been able to focus on your work? And then breaking it down, score yourself a 1 if you spend most of your time trying to focus on your work. Score yourself a 2 if you are able to complete some work but spend a lot of time trying to focus. Score yourself a 3 if you complete most of your work but sometimes struggle to stay focused. Score yourself a 4 if you are focused most of the time. Score yourself a 5 if you are focused on your work the entire time. Another option is simply asking open-ended questions. And when you ask the open-ended questions, it's awesome if you can record the responses. So what it looks like is you come up with a few open-ended questions, and the children answer those questions before you begin teaching them mindfulness. And then you record it. A voice recording, or you could video record it, simply on your phone. And then you ask them those same open-ended questions, a month later or 2 months later, and you're recording it. And then you ask them those same exact open-ended questions even further down the line. And it's really great feedback to go ahead and listen to those recordings at the end, back to back, each question, how did their answers evolve over time? And it's also really great for the children to see the evolution as well, listening to their own recordings, watching their own recordings. And same with the paper surveys, at the end, compiling those surveys and showing them, look how you answered here, in the 3rd month compared to the 1st month, and showing them that growth. It's all about the growth. How have we evolved? How have we grown as a result of our mindfulness practice? So I hope this was helpful. Definitely not anything that's mandatory. It has nothing to do with the certification, but this might be something that at some point you'll want to facilitate, implement throughout your program. And it will be very impressive if you want to work with certain organizations, bringing this kind of data to the organizations and showing them, look, this is what I've done, and this is the growth that I've seen, that we've experienced because of my teachings. And also it's impressive to whoever you're working with to say, I'm going to take record, and I'm going to do surveys, and I'm going to show you the growth that your students or your children, whoever that the group is that you're working with, will have a record of their growth, and this is how I can show it to you at the end of the program. So I hope you have fun with it. It is time consuming and a bit of work, but I think it can really be worth it.